I slipped on my pants and strapped on my shoes, walked out onto the street, and equipped my compact disc player onto my belt. Marvin Gaye's greatest hits. What's going on? I began running towards the street while quickly increasing the player's volume. The playback mode was set to repeat. Mother, mother, there's far too many of you crying. Brother, brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. It was raining, and I hit the street at a full force, barely careening myself into a car that was coming up the notoriously steep hill. But suddenly, this imminent danger didn't even matter. All that mattered was my focus. All that mattered was the fact that I could quite possibly free myself at last. Who are they to judge us simply because our hair is long? I turned my CD player off, since electronics were not needed where I was going. I came right into the right mood to enjoy my favorite place in the world, Devil's Den, a nature preserve right down the hill from my home. I ventured there alone, escaped out of the house at dusk to enjoy the splendor of the shifting environment around me, the fading moon and rising sun, the stars that sparkled in the brief open patches between the rain clouds above, the moist dew that was clinging to the crabgrass that led to the preserve's entrance, all that were as remarkable as I'd never seen them before. The preserve was closed after 11 p.m. and before 7 a.m. A long metal chain made of steel outstretched the front entrance that led inside. There read a sign that stated, "No trespassers permitted while the preserve is closed. State Ordinance 1666, Damien." The sign was made of a rotting birch wood and difficult to read on first sight. I figured I would not get in trouble if I pleaded ignorance to the sign's passage upon getting caught. I headed down the west dirt trail according to my compass. The trail was poorly maintained, and as a result, many pesky weeds growing out on its edges. These weeds were seemingly bent on taking over the entire breadth of the walkway. Trees alongside the pathway were marked with a red streak of paint to guide adventurers as to exactly where they were. Small bugs fled across the trail trying to dodge the heavy weight and vibrations of my new hiking boots. Birds that were gathered on nearby trees flew 15 feet ahead for every 10 feet I journeyed west, while small twigs and formerly tree-bound sticks were easily crushed under the amazing power of my feet, and the outlying plant branches were quickly dismissed of my presence by a quick pull of my arm. At the end of the trail was a familiar granite rock-faced cliff. The glacial structure lengthened 20 feet high. It was scattered with small plants that sprouted from tiny patches of soil that were only possibly blown there by the wind, the same wind that now whistles through every crevice of the structure, creating a symphony of whooshes and zooms that rattle the surrounding trees and make the forest seem alive. Something told me I had been to this location before. I noticed the distinct foot ledges that were naturally carved out in the jagged rock face, the seemingly man-made rock path that ramped up to the top, and candy wrappers dropped from the past adventures that lay strewn about its uprising surface. I stepped on the foot ledges with my hiking boots and lifted myself up the rock pathway that led me all the way up to the top. Coming to the top of the glacial plateau, I found that I was at Thompson's Meadow, my most treasured place in all of the Devil's Den Preserve. Deer stood eating the meadow's tall wheat field set up in a family formation, mother and father getting to the food source first, with two little offspring feasting in delight behind their parental units. Behind in the sight other times, I've always been amazed at the new things I may notice in the surroundings of the meadow. This time I noticed a few new things. The way the butterflies performed their mating dances around me, the way that all the wheat curves in identical sequence of each other from the wind's might, and the multitude of tree species around me, from elms to birchwoods, oaks, and maples, they were all in harmony, sharing the same place of residence. I walked out from the cliff edge towards the meadow to where the meadow meshed into forest, where the western trail started again at a slightly higher altitude. I planned to again venture west, this time into the region where I had never traveled before, but I was stopped by a citing a familiar name that was carved into a beautifully tall birch wood beauty. If the name I had noticed was not my own, I would have easily ignored the tree and kept moving onward with my journey. But reading my engraving, Tim Telesco, 1996, a flood of memories were now streaming into my mind and quickly accessed. I remembered my original travel down the Western Trail in 1996, the enormous troubles that I had figuring out the method for getting up the cliff face, crossing Thompson's Meadow and becoming startled at the re-entrance of the Western Trail, the quick carving of my name in the closest tree I could find, the adrenaline pump sprint out the way I came, the fears that made my eyes twitch and my skin break out into hives. Looking closer at the now hollowed birchwood tree, I came to realize that my name and date were overwritten by another person's carving. Damien 1666. Looking up and down the dark, damaged bark of the tree, I noticed other adventurers had their carvings outwritten by Damien as well. Charlie Osborne 1997 was carved out by the characters Damien 1666. So was Chip Blando 1998, Pat Roberts 1999, and so on with the names in ascending years. Standing in place of the great birchwood, I began to scour in the other trees around me. In doing so, I noticed all the elms, oaks, and maples in Thompson's Meadows had the exact identical trend and markings. A large black hole in the rotting birch turned into a magma red and began to seethe with plasmatic energy that soon turned into a singular hypnotic circular motion towards the base of the tree. Two blue cobalt gauntlets reached out from the inside of the hole and grabbed my torn t-shirt. The hands attempted to pull me inside, but I resisted, punching and kicking until the creature was forced to release me back into the relative safety of the meadow. I ran back towards the meadow the way I came. I then quickly crawled down the rock face and got back onto the western trail. Running, I tripped on a stubborn root that made a half circle from where it stuck out of the ground. I lay on the ground in a dizzy dismay while suddenly around me the entire forest burst into a disturbingly bright red flame of fire, setting all the trees ablaze and setting my heart pumping straight through my chest. A beast most closely described as the devil's child transported himself in front of me. Acting on instinct, I ran between his legs and sprinted back east where I could easily find my exit to freedom. He began to chase me, but soon I was out of sight and out of mind. Incredibly scared of what I began to witness, I ran out of Devilsdown as fast as I could, but first I made a stop at the entrance to the preserve. I took a souvenir with me that I still have to this day. The sign stated, "No trespassers permitted while this preserve is closed. State Ordinance 1666, Damien." As I walked to the road that led back towards my house, I again quit my CD player and triggered the repeat button to play Marvin Gaye's greatest hits, Music of Soul and Love. I got back to my house and crawled into bed at 6 a.m. and imagined what my mom's warm apple pie would taste like when I got to eat it upon waking up. But I would not need to anticipate that euphoric texture, for I had already had one taste of adventure and another taste of freedom that fateful fall morning.